Hi guys. Some people have brought up an issue that's popped up in how I worked through the Google Sheets for the video lectures this week, and in attempting to do the homework. And we discovered an important way that Google is calculating variance and standard deviation that differs from what we're trying to do. Okay, so there's two ways to calculate the variance, and that'll have an effect on the standard deviation. It comes down to what we divide the sum of squares by. There are two different ways. One is you divide by n, the number of observations, or you can also divide by n minus 1, one less than the number of observations. We are going to be using both methods. Both methods are a form of variance, but they are two different kinds of variances. I don't want to go too much into the details about the differences. The short version is, when you're dividing by n minus 1, you're trying to estimate the variance of the population that your data sample came from. Whereas we are attempting to calculate the variance of just our data set, just our subset of numbers, and not try to infer the variance of a wider population. So the variance equation, the variance function in Google Sheets that I was having you guys use based on the video lectures is using the n minus 1 method when we, in this chapter, in this homework, need to use the divide by n function. So I'm going to show you a different way to do the homework so that you can see how your answers will match the back of the book. And I also think it gives you a more visceral feel for how we're calculating variance and standard deviation. So let's hop on over to Google Sheets and take a look at that. Okay, so what we're seeing here is the data that I've already entered from problem 1 from the textbook, the set 1, problem 1 that was assigned. Right, so we have 9 points of data here, right? It says 10 because we have the heading here, but there's 9 points of data. And the first step is to calculate the mean or the average. We can use the average function to do that. That'll give us the correct answer. So our average is 29. Now, we could do for the variance. In the video lectures, we use the variance function, right, for calculating the variance of our data. Right? And if we do that, we get 10.75. And if we use the standard deviation function and we select our data, right, we get 3.2 or 3.3. Right? So this is what we get when we use the n minus 1 method, as I was talking about. That's not what we're trying to do. So I gave you the wrong idea. But let's kind of do this in a manual way. It helps us make sure we get the right answer. I think helps us understand what's going on with the actual calculation. So remember, what we need is we need a sum of squares. A sum of squares is when we take each data point and we subtract the mean and then we square it. So let's do that. Let's take each data point and subtract the mean. Right? So in this case, I can tell it take the data and I can give it the cell. Right? So I'm going to take the cell A2. Right? That's where that data is stored. Right? It's in cell A, column A, row 2, and we are going to subtract the mean of 29. And there we go. And we need to do this for each data piece. With Google Sheets, we can actually just copy that and then we can paste it and it will move the equation down to each cell and it'll change to match the appropriate cell. So that is the difference score of our data minus the mean. Okay. Well, remember, if we were to take all of this and we were to sum it up, so let's take all of our data and add it all up, what you'll find is the answer is 0. We talked about that. It's because there's as much data above the mean as below the mean, so when we add up the different scores, they're going to be 0. So in order to capture the magnitude, what we have to do is we have to square this value. So I'm going to do B2. Again, that's the cell where our data is in. And to square it, we use Shift-6 for this little caret, and then we just put 2. So that's squared the data. Okay? Same thing, we can now copy that and paste that answer all the way down. And now we have the squares of the different scores. So what we need is we need the sum of squares. So I can get the sum of all of these answers, all these squares. And this 86 is now my sum of squares. Okay? So with the sum of squares calculated, we can then calculate the variance, all right, by just taking the 86 and divide it by the 9, which is the number of observations. We have something like 9.5. And to get the standard deviation, we take the square root of that 9.5, and we get 3. Okay? So these are the answers that we're looking for. These are the answers that will match the back of the book. They differ from over here because, look, if we take the 86, right, and we divide by the n minus 1, which would be 8, that's where we get the 10.75, and then the square root of the 10.75 is where we get the 3.3. So again, we will learn when it's appropriate to use n minus 1 to calculate variance. This is not the time for that, and I gave you guys the wrong information. I apologize for that, but hopefully this makes it a little clearer about what we're doing and how to get the right answer, and we will talk more about n and n minus 1 in a couple of chapters when it becomes more relevant. So take a look at this, go back, review your homework, make sure it makes any sense. If you have any questions, post them to the discussion board, email me, and I will get back to you.